Well, we are gathered here in this beautiful sunny city of St. George. We are here for the purpose of having a recorded story of my fabulous, exciting life. My childhood was spent mostly in the Ozark Hills of Missouri. And there, I got lots of good stories there. My teenage years, high school, were spent mostly in Poplar Bluff, Missouri, and that's just a few miles south of something, I don't know what. Anyway, we lived in a little town called Moody when I was very small. And that's when my baby brother was born. So I have a few stories. You can't help but have some interesting stories when you're living out in the country and your father decides he wants to go into the sawmill business. He didn't have any education to speak of. So he borrowed some money from a bank in Fisk, Missouri, and he bought a sawmill and he bought 40 acres of wooded land, and that was going to, that's what they were going to cut up with the sawmill. And we didn't have any place to live, so he said, I'll build a house. So, and believe me, it was rough. The boards were just rough, what do you call it?
Rough hew.
What?
Rough cut, rough hew.
Yeah, like that. They weren't real
sanded
finished or sanded or anything. And and we had 1, 2, 3, 4 rooms, 6 children. The 2 older boys were already kind of out working at farms and stuff on the weekend. But in that area, there were some interesting things happen. One that I remember, and I was just 8 years old, and I can't really explain what it was, but I was sitting on the couch, and everybody else was like in the kitchen in different places, and I was just sitting there by myself. And I started thinking of all of the neighbors and friends that I have that were real poor. Now, I'm thinking of the poor, okay, and here we are in this house that Dad built, 4 rooms, no running water, no
you
indoor
never
plumbing.
thought of yourself as being poor.
No, it didn't. I was 8 years old. It didn't occur. There was nothing to compare it to.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we were all kind of in that same. But there were some that were poorer than poor, and I was just so touched by that in my heart, and I just started weeping, and it wasn't a little kid's cry like you're mad about something. It was a spirit. I mean, I just felt so much empathy for these poor people that were all around. Well, this gets the attention of my mother and everybody else that's in the kitchen, and they come in and say, well, what are you crying about? And I said, it's nothing. And Mom kind of sensed it was something like that, but my brothers,
Yeah.
oh, okay, what'd you get into? What'd you do? And so they thought I was crying because I was scared or whatever. But I couldn't tell them because it was just a moment,
Yeah.
For me. And I don't know why that happened. And I've always wondered about it because I was young, and I didn't. Of course, we didn't belong to the church. My dad was a minister, preacher, whatever, and in a church that sort of modeled itself after the reorganized church, and the reorganized church sort of modeled itself after the true church. And he liked that idea of restoration and modern scriptures and so on. So but I didn't know anything about it. He didn't bother to teach us about it. You know,
Well,
it was
when did he actually start getting involved in being a preacher and
well. That's interesting. When they first got married, my dad was a drinker. I mean, you know, they would have drinking parties, and everybody bring their guitar and their fiddle and all that stuff, and and then they were having like a picnic or something outdoors down by a river, and there was a group of people on the bank, and they were baptizing. And my dad was looking at them. Well, that's interesting. That's just the way the scriptures say. In the Bible, they would go down into the River Jordan or whatever and baptize. So he went over and started talking to them, and it happened to be some people from this Church of Christ that was a branch off of the reorganized church. And that's when he really started getting religious. He gave up the drinking, supposedly.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what he did. And they had 12 apostles, although they never had the full 12, because they couldn't get that many.
They couldn't find enough men to be.
No, they couldn't find a quorum of 12. So, but nevertheless, he was one of them, and he was the secretary of the 12. And so he did a lot of traveling, and the members paid for it, church paid for it. And I'm not going to go into their teachings because we don't have that much time, and it's not that important really. So, but it was important in our home because it had a great influence on our home, but not in the sense of, I don't remember anything spiritual or moving that I experienced with my dad.
Yeah.
But my mom, that's a different story. Very wonderful spiritual woman that, I mean, when she prayed for something, look out, you know.
Yeah.
And so I learned to pray for my mother. And I'm so glad that I did, because that's what has changed my life. I don't say change, it guided my life.
Oh, yeah.
And so those were things that I experienced in this little almost shack.
Yeah.
And it was on a country road. There was no church around. The school was about a mile down a hilly road, up and down, up and down. And when it rained or snowed or anything, it was muddy, and we had to walk to school in it. But we didn't think anything about that because most of the kids walked to school. So there were, as I think about it, there were some really important things that happened in my life at that point. So I kind of hold that location special to me because of that experience I had when I was 8 years old, and it was an experience with the Spirit,
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
And I didn't know that's what it was.
Interesting age that happened.
I know. I thought about that. And the only reason that I know I was 8, because I can't remember the dates and everything, but I have one picture of me when I was young, and it's a school picture, and on the back of it, my mom had written Edith, age 9.
Okay.
And I knew that, okay, because that was when I was 8.
Is that the one where you have the little cardigan that's buttoned all the way up?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a cute picture.
And so that location, besides the fact that it's just an adventurous place to live.
Yeah.
We go out snake hunting and swim in the creek, and I remember one day we were out in the woods just in the back of the house, and there was a log that had been rotted out all in the center, you know, so it was a hollow log. And so we were just playing around. We'd look down through that hollow log, and all of a sudden there was 2 eyes looking back at us. scared us to death, and it was a possum.
Oh, my gosh.
So let's catch this possum. So
They can be mean.
they were mean, and so somebody got on this end of the log, and somebody else got on this end. So we caught the possum,
Oh my gosh.
and we brought it home.
Oh, my.
Are you kidding me?
And I don't. We had well,
Have this
we,
for dinner.
yeah, right. We had possum.
I mean, that just cracks kids. Picture it.
Yeah.
Picking
Well,
that thing up.
yeah. Our brothers were with us. 2 brothers were with us. My brother Bill wouldn't have anything to do with that. He was far too citified by now. Anyway, boy, that possum didn't like it at all. And when my dad saw what we had, he said, "Oh, you don't. We don't want that thing around here. Let it go." And we didn't want to let it go, so we kind of
So
fooled around, and pretty soon the possum got inside the car.
Oh no.
And we were trying to catch that possum. I have a feeling that I was a spectator
Yeah.
because my older sister and my older brothers were there.
Yeah.
And I don't remember how we got rid of that. I think my dad just finally, it was in the car, so he finally just started the car and drove away towards some woods, and let the thing out.
door.
But we thought we had us a pet.
First pet possum.
Mom, tell us. Okay, so this house that Grandpa built, how, as far as time frame, like where had you moved from? How long did you live in the house, and where did you
Well,
move to?
Okay, I was born in Lansing, Michigan, and the reason we were in Lansing, Michigan, because my parents were from that southeastern part of Missouri. It's because a lot of people did this back then. This is right after the Depression, or right during the Depression, and they moved to Lansing or to Michigan because there was work there, and they could make a living.
Boy, what a difference
With
now.
like with the auto.
Yeah, it's very, the automobile, Detroit, Pontiac. And, but then, when things went kind of sour for a while, haul the kids in the car and go back to the homeland, back to the Ozarks. And so we lived in St. Louis for a while because of that. Now I'm getting ahead because that was during the war. And moved to St. Louis because you could get jobs in the factories making whatever they needed for war. But, okay, so born in Michigan, raised for a period of time in St. Louis, but back to Missouri in between the big cities. And when we lived in St. Louis, that was during the war. We had this old radio, and now back in those days, a radio was a piece of furniture.
Yeah. Right.
It was like about that tall, and I don't know. I guess speakers or something were down below there. I don't know, but it was that we'd gather around that radio, and we were so far out in the country. It was sometimes hard to get the waves or whatever, and get a lot of static. And my dad would lean up right to the radio just close as he could when the news was on, so he could hear what was going on in the world. And I remember he's listening, and he says, "They bombed Pearl Harbor," just screamed it out.
Oh man.
And we're like, "What's Pearl Harbor?"
Pearl Harbor? Yeah.
And then another time he did that was when President Roosevelt died. My dad was a Democrat through and through. And the reason he was a Democrat is because of the Depression, and Roosevelt brought us out of the Depression. And, I can kind of understand why he would be such a staunch
Well, he was the
Democrat.
president for so long that a lot of people, that was just like the president.
Oh, yeah, he had, 3 terms?
4.
Well, he died in his fourth.
4th, yeah. During the war, when we lived in St. Louis, we hated the Japs. Oh, we were taught that. Now I look back on that and think, well, but how could you not?
Yeah.
They were mean.
Yeah.
I've read life stories of people who've been captured, and the military and the leaders were really mean, cruel, and so we believed that little kids, that if we got a spoon or we didn't have shovels,
dig.
if a spoon, and you keep digging and digging, you're going to end up in China or Japan or somewhere like that. So we didn't want to dig too deep. And then, and so most of our years when we lived in St. Louis was around the war, because it was raging, and all we knew was the Japs were doing bad things, and we didn't like them.
Yeah.
And my brothers would bring home comic books, and they'd be fighting the Japs, and they'd have them all, their skin was all yellow, and they
Yeah.
pictured them, and they all had buck teeth, and they all wore these little round.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way we portrayed them, because they were our enemy.
Yeah.
And a little kid, they're so impressionable,
Yeah.
things like that.
And the propaganda. They
Oh,
would draw
yeah,
Japanese like that. So
So that covers my childhood for a few years. We spent in St. Louis, and now the period that we spent in Michigan was early on, because I was born there.
right. Mm-hmm.
And then the period that we spent in St. Louis was during the war, which was, I think America got into it
41.
41.
49?
41.
41, yeah.
So you would have been like 4 years old.
Yeah. Yes, I remember, because I peed my pants in kindergarten. In St. Louis. Though the teacher wouldn't let me go, And so we were having a visitor. And she said, now I want all of you to behave yourself, and superintendent's coming, and I needed to go to the bathroom. Well, normally she'll just let us go to the bathroom, but not this time,
Good
because we were having an important visitor.
Oh my
And I said,
goodness.
teacher, I need to use the bathroom. And she says, no, you've got to wait till our visitor leaves. And I just put my head down like that, and I just,
That's so sad.
there was just a puddle all around my chair.
How
my gosh.
embarrassing for a little girl.
Oh, I was humiliated. And
Do you
so
remember how the teacher reacted?
she was very, very angry with me. And I just got up and ran out. And the apartments that we were living in, they were apartments that were erected just for the laborers that came to do the war thing, making bullets or whatever they did. And so I knew my way home, and I ran home, and I was crying, and I told Mom what happened. And it was toward the end of the school year. And she said, don't worry about it. You don't have to go back to school. We're moving in a month or so, and we're going to be in a new area. And I said, oh, thank goodness. I didn't have to go face that teacher or all those kids.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That was nice of her.
well, that teacher learned a lesson.
No kidding.
yeah.
Was that a one-room schoolhouse, or did you?
No, this was in St. Louis. And,
Okay.
and it was right in the area of St. Louis where the factories were, and there were a bunch of apartment buildings.
So it was more modernized.
Yeah. I remember that it was August. We were living in the apartments, and it was my birthday. Well, I have always felt that I deserved a birthday party from as long as I can remember. But we didn't get presents on our birthday. We didn't, have the money. But my mom would always try to do something special. So anyway, there was no money and there was nothing, but it was my birthday, and that made it a special day. So I determined that I'm going to have a birthday party with, there's apartments, and there's lots of kids, little kids. So I put the word out all through the apartment complexes that I was having a birthday party. And oh, you know how little kids are. They're all excited about a birthday party. So I thought, okay, now what am I going to serve? What will we do? I probably didn't use the word serve.
Yeah.
So we had an orange, maybe 2, I don't remember. But there was about 5 or 6 kids that came. Oh, it's Edith's birthday party. And so we're all out in the front yard, and I had 2 oranges and some soda crackers. And I didn't have anything to cut the orange with, but I did find a razor blade. So I probably took it out of my dad's razor. And so we had sliced oranges and soda crackers. And that was
No
my birthday.
sliced fingers from the razor
No,
blade.
we didn't get cut. And that was my birthday party. And I was bound and determined I'm going to have a birthday party.
And they all thought it was great.
All that, yeah, we had fun. And then the other thing I remember about those apartments, there was a spoiled little brat. I mean, his dad was in the war. He was gone. His mother spoiled him. He could have anything he wanted, and you know, he was obnoxious. And so he would pick on me a lot. Not pick, you know, to fight, but just teasing and
Yeah,
so on.
yeah.
And one day I thought, you know, I've had enough of that kid. So he came over and he was mouthing off to me, and I would double up my fist and I went wham like
Oh
that.
my goodness.
Oh my God.
And he went home screaming and crying.
Where did you hit him? In the face?
Uh huh.
Oh.
And she just had a fit. The mother, oh my goodness, I had injured her precious son. And when my dad came home from work, I thought I was going to be in trouble, and he laughed.
He probably knew how spoiled the kid was. too.
Everybody did. Everybody did. He was a brat, you know. And my dad told that story so many times because I just let him have it.
You were like a tomboy, weren't you?
Yeah, well, I kind of was, yeah, I guess. But
She could handle
cute,
herself.
pretty,
Sure.
yeah. Yeah, he called me Little Lulu.
Really?
You know that expression? She's a Lulu.
That's
Old, old, old.
right.
But there used to be a song about Lulu. Well, yeah, I was a Lulu. Anything that was really unusual or, you know, that was a Lulu. So I guess it was a compliment. Whatever, the kid got punched. There was one other thing. We lived in an apartment. They were right beside each other. And you open the door and there's stairs go straight up. And then there's this apartment. I think it had an apartment down here on the floor too, but then you went upstairs. I can't remember for sure, but don't check me on this.
Oh, okay.
Buildings are not there anymore.
Yes.
The war's over.
Whatever you say is
We'll
the
go
way it
to the
was.
archives and look at the floor plans.
Anyway, there was a little girl my age, and she lived in an apartment right close to us. And we would play at the bottom of the stairs, you know. And we were playing house, dress up and stuff. And so we brought whatever we could. And she had the most beautiful, to me, most beautiful beaded purse. And I don't even know if her mother knew she had it. But it was a little, you know, the little
Like-
fancy purse. And it was all beaded all over it and sparkly. And I love that purse. So that was always my purse when we were playing house. Well, the mother calls lunch to her daughter. She says, you need to come up and have your lunch. And Edith can just wait right here. So she went up to lunch, and here I am with the beaded purse. And nobody's around.
Uh-oh.
So what do? I was so tempted to take that purse. I thought, okay, I could take it and just run home, you know, and I would do it, and I could hide it in a dresser drawer, and then just take it out every so often and look at it. And I sat there and I thought, and something just told me, you don't want to steal that purse, my conscience. And I didn't. And the rest of my life to this day, I am so grateful that I didn't take that purse.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think that it was just a step in the direction to where the Lord wanted me to go.
Yeah.
You know, was to do the right thing. And I remember that story. I told that story when I was teaching primary one year, and I would go to DI and collect, if anything looked like a beaded purse like that was, I would buy it. And I had 3 or 4 and I still do, beaded purses in my drawers because I wanted to have a visual aid
use
to
as
tell the
visual.
story.
Oh, I bet those primary kids just.
Oh, Sister
They
Ashton, you
yeah.
know, Karen Ashton, her little girl was in my class, and she wrote me a note and thanked me. She said, you don't know the impression that you made on my daughter with that. She told me the story, and she was really touched by it, and so on. So, yeah. Well, I was telling a story about a little girl about her age,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So, anyway, that's St. Louis. I don't think I have any more outstanding memories, except when my cousin Laura Jean came to visit us, and they still live back in southern Missouri. She had enough money to take us across the street, which was a beer garden, they used to call it, and a bar, in other words.
Oh,
And
okay.
she,
Beer garden.
yeah.
Make it sound fancy. Beer garden.
Well, she bought us an ice cream cone,
Oh, wow.
and I got strawberry, and oh my gosh, it was so wonderful. And there was a song popular. See, we live right across the street from this bar, the apartments were. And there was a song popular during that time, and it was, oh gosh, I can't think of it right now. Lay that pistol down, babe, lay that pistol down. You know, on and on. And it would play all night.
The same song?
Well, pretty much, you know. And my dad said, I wish somebody would pick up a pistol and shoot. I remember that. So that was St. Louis, and we end up back in Missouri, got to get it right. We went to, we always, of course, were in these little one-room schoolhouses. When we lived on that country road around Moody, like I said, it was about a mile walk to school, and our teacher drove right by our house, and she had one of these old square Model Ts or whatever. When she found out that we had to walk, she said, I'll pick you up.
Wow.
So, especially when it was raining or snowing or whatever. So I remember her because she wanted to do something to give these country kids some manners and refinement. So one day she brought dishes and silverware and so on, and she taught us how to set a table. And I've never forgotten it. And I was so happy. And I was only about, what grade would you be in when you were 8 years old?
Third.
Probably second or third, yeah.
Somewhere in there. Anyway, and it was, there weren't a lot of students, but it was 1 through 8
Yeah.
in one room. And she taught us all how to set a table, and I was so excited when we went home that day. I told my mom, we learned how to set a table today, and I want to do it for dinner. And she said, well, yeah, that's fine. Well, first of all, we didn't have enough plates that matched, which we didn't care. We didn't even know they were supposed to match. And I tried to set the table, and we didn't have enough forks and knives to do it properly. But I told Mom where they belonged.
Yeah.
Now, if we had enough forks, it would go here. And if we had enough knives, it would go here, and so on. And then the glass, where the glass goes. And she said, well, that's okay. We don't have everything, but just do the best you can. And so I did. And she said, now, why don't you go get one of my mason jars and go pick some flowers and put it in the middle of the table.
Oh,
Cute.
So we did. I did. And so that's how I learned how to set a table. And I would be grateful to that teacher because she was a country teacher, but she was a country teacher with some class, and she
Yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to try and teach her students
yeah.
the same. And
And
Well, I also think that your mom had class
Well, that's what I was
too,
gonna say.
because
oh,
I
she
mean,
was
even though you lived out in the middle of
nowhere.
nowhere, I mean, she made sure that you were clean, that you had your teeth were brushed. That,
Oh my gosh.
I mean, you guys were.
Yeah, she.
You ate. You didn't eat off the table like some of the people.
No.
yeah. Well, and also, like with that story that you just told, she might have just been like, whatever. We don't have all the stuff.
Yeah,
Just
so we
don't worry
don't
about
bother,
it.
yeah.
But she not only encouraged you to do it, but then helped you make it even more special with the flowers.
Yeah.
That's just
Yeah. At some point, we rented a house from really good friends of ours. In fact, their daughter married my brother, and we were always real close to that family.
which brother?
Bill,
Okay.
Brother Bill, the oldest one and the handsome one. And he had her father had lots of property. And they had, so here's this country road going, and then up at the top of that hill, they had built a new house. And up at the top of the hill here was their old house. And at the time, it used to be located somewhere else, and he had to move to the top of that hill. It was a century-old house.
Wow.
And so he told us we could just rent it, And that was when my dad was building the house out in Moody. So we lived there. And that's when my baby brother Michael was born. And right before that school year ended, the teacher, she had a really bad temper. And she got after my brother Gerald. And he was really, had a hot temper. Nobody messed with him, And the teacher made the mistake of deciding that she was going to give him a whipping, because that's what they did back then. Well, he had a pocket knife,
Oh no.
and he pulled that knife on her and said, "Don't you come any closer."
Oh my gosh.
And the teacher says, she was scared.
Yeah.
But she told him, I don't know the words she used, but she kicked him out of school and told the superintendent and so on. And again, Michael was born in May, so it was toward the end of the year. So
Yeah,
He
yeah.
didn't have to go
We're
back to
outta here.
school either.
And how old was Gerald when this happened?
he was probably 8th grade would be
Oh,
what?
wow,
How old?
yeah.
Yeah.
He's not like a little kid.
Yeah.
That would have been
No, he
really
wasn't a
scary
little
for the
kid.
teacher. I can't believe a teacher, a woman, thought she was going to whip an 8th, grade.
She lost her temper.
13-year-old kid.
She had a really bad temper. Bullying is not a new thing.
Yeah.
And I was in 1st grade, and a certain group of 1st graders, sounds so funny, a group of 1st graders started bullying me.
Well, what would they do?
They'd make fun of me, make fun of my clothes, and yell and all that kind of stuff. And so I went in, and there was a shack out beside the school. And I just went in there, and they said they'd tease me about stuff, no, you don't know such and so on. Anything to tease us. And so I just started crying and crying. And so some kids ran in and told the teacher, Edith's crying because these kids are saying bad things to her or whatever. So she came out and she took me inside the school and set me up on her lap. And she was comforting me. I was still crying. And she says, well, what were they doing to you? And I told her, and I was so upset. I said, well, they did this and they did that. And don't you think that would hurt you? I said it like that. And she said, why, you little smart aleck girl.
Wow.
I told you she had a temper.
Yeah.
And I used that tone of voice.
Yeah.
And man, she whammed me
She
on the
went
rear.
from being all sweet and cuddly.
Oh,
to-
that fast. And I was like, what did I just do?
Oh my gosh.
And so I'll never forget that teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were the kids, did they start picking on you because you were poorer than the other
No.
kids? Or why? Why do you think?
No,
maybe they
I
had a
was,
crush on you? What
there were
was the deal?
plenty of them poorer than me.
Okay. Why do you think they focused on
Kids
you? Who
just
knows?
do that,
Yeah.
And then they move on to somebody else.
Right,
and
right.
so
Vulnerable
on,
person.
you know.
and
Yeah.
pick up-
Or it may have been because I was a cute little girl and
Yeah.
the boys had crushes and they didn't know what else to do. And,
Yeah.
because in that group of first graders was my childhood sweetheart, Marvin Dale. And he had big brown eyes, and he looked like a dairy version of Burt Reynolds or Sean Connery. He had dark hair and big
In
brown
first
eyes.
grade.
So I that may have been it. I don't know.
And you had also, I remember you telling us stories about some teacher that was mean to you and would make fun of you in front of the class and stuff.
Oh my gosh,
That was when
Mrs.
you were a little
What's wrong
older,
with
wasn't
teachers?
it?
Yeah,
back then?
this is back to Dudley. All right, we ended up in Dudley. I think my dad was out of work again, and so he had a cousin that they were in Michigan working, and he had a house in Dudley.
Was this
and-
after the house in Moody that you moved to Dudley, or? Can you remember?
I think it was.
Okay.
He contacted his cousin to see if we could have that house for a while. So we moved back there. And she had no children. And she was very musical. Had a piano, and she never did have children. So it's just the two of them. But they stayed in Michigan working, and we lived in that house. She had nice dishes, and I bet we broke every one of them. And so it was Christmas time, and it turned out that my mom's grandpa owned a house, and Clarence and Mary were coming back to their house, so we had to leave. So we moved into Grandpa Eli's house, and it was not as nice as Mary's, and it wasn't painted, just the gray wood. Anyway, we moved into that, and Mary said, Mary was our cousin, distant cousin. It was Christmas time, and we wanted to have a Christmas tree, which we never had. And so we decided that we had a cedar tree out in front yard, and the boys and Ann and I helped them cut a big branch off of that cedar tree, and that was our Christmas tree. But we didn't have a tree stand, so we brought it in, and we leaned it up in the corner, and we put stuff around it so it wouldn't fall, and but we didn't have any decorations. And Mary says, well, I have some decorations, and we're not going to use them, so why don't you use those? Oh, my goodness, that was so wonderful. They were store-bought
Yeah.
decorations.
Uh-huh.
And so we put them all up on the tree. I mean, she came down to see it, and she admired it and so on. So we were sitting around the kitchen table, and something went bang, boom.
Oh no.
The tree fell over, and almost all of those ornaments broke.
Oh.
Oh my gosh.
oh, we were so embarrassed. And Mary tried to act like it wasn't any big deal, but we were sad because we didn't have a tree anymore. And that's the end of that story. I don't have.
Yeah. Okay, so
So
is that
about
where you
the-
live with the mean teacher? The mean teacher.
The mean.
Oh, that's where we were headed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This was in Dudley, Missouri, and
We're
went
talking
down.
Margaret Mallory lived.
It was about maybe a half a mile down the road, and they had just built a new school in Dudley. It was brick, and it was 3 rooms.
Wow.
So that was really big time. And again, our moves were so close together. I was still quite young. I think I was in the 1st grade, 2nd grade, somewhere in there. And so they would have us, she would have us, when it was our grade, we'd go up to the front and recite or read or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this one lady, teacher, her name was Mrs. Craig, and she braided her hair, 2 braids, and then she'd bring them up to the top, stick bobby pins to hold them. And she had false teeth, and when she talked, they clicked.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Oh jeez.
And she had a son named Cotton Craig.
What?
Yeah,
Wow.
Cotton Craig, and he had a crush
Craig.
on Anne, Doris Ann,
Uh-huh.
my sister. And she matured young, and she had blonde hair, and she was very pretty. And he just really had a crush on her, but she didn't want to have anything to do with him.
Yeah.
Well, when Miss Craig found out that Anne wouldn't have anything to do with her son, boy, she started really hating me. And she was so mean to me. One day I got ready for school. I didn't have anything to wear. I had to take one of my brother's shirts with the torn off, cut sleeves, and a skirt, but I didn't have any buttons for the shirt, and I didn't have a fastener for my skirt. So I got some safety pins and used safety pins there. And I always had to wear my brother's socks because there was never enough money to buy socks for the girls. So we went up in front of the room to recite, and she says, it's really too bad, but there are some kids that come to school, you just wouldn't believe how they dress. And so she went from my feet right up through and named, she didn't say me, but she named everything. She said, some come to school, the shoes, they don't have any socks, and they got pins instead of buttons. They wear their brother's shirts. And all the kids are saying, oh my gosh, And
Were
I'm-
you standing up there when she was doing
No, I
You were
was sitting. And then I was looking down, and she kept doing that, and I figured out what she was doing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And
Poor thing.
so I felt humiliated. And that's another teacher I'll never forget,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mrs.
Aw.
Craig.
You remember her
May she
name.
rest in peace.
Yes.
Where did you live when your dad, Grandpa Thornton, when Grandma put the ring on in
Inside
the wall when the house wasn't finished all the way, and then it got built in?
Okay, that was in Moody, the house that Dad built. And what was your question? How old was I?
Yeah, where was that? How old were you? Tell the story.
I was
that.
about 8.
Okay, tell that
8
story.
or 9. Okay, so I'm just telling this. I feel like I've already told it. Dad was working on the house. It was in May, and Mom took a chair. She was nursing Michael, a newborn baby, and she put a chair under the shade tree. And but her hands were swollen because she had just had a baby, and she was nursing and so on. So she had her wedding rings on, and she, believe me, they didn't look like that either.
It's probably just a band, huh?
No,
No?
it was
She
two.
had some kind of little
Oh,
jewel.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So she said she took them off, and Dad said, "Well, just we didn't have any furniture in the house yet," and so he said, "Just put it on the nail there inside the wall, and I'll be boarding that up later today, and so I'll take it down." So she did, and then he just went ahead and finished the room, and forgot to get her rings off the nail. So he boarded up the room, and Mom asked where her rings were, and he said, "Oh, I forgot to take them off. Oh, I'll do that later. I'll take the boards down." And he never did.
I would have done it myself.
I know,
Yeah.
it's so funny, obviously we've heard this story before, and to think, okay, it was a rough-hewn house anyway. It's not like there was, the structure of it,
Finished.
and then insulation, and then drywall, and then little whatever. It's just like, it's a board. Take it down,
Yeah.
get the rings out.
All it was the way he built it. He put the 2x4s, like this, and then between the 2x4s, it was just a rough hewn
Right.
board.
Mhm.
Hammered it in, and then what he did, he hadn't done this yet, but eventually he ordered some wallpaper, but it was really insulation. It was gray and heavy, but it had flowers stamped on it.
Oh, okay.
And then that was the insulation. So once he got the boards up, we had pink flowers in our bedroom with the gray.
Kind of a clever idea.
Yeah.
Okay, now, did you say that house at one point was still standing?
It was when Dad and I went by, or
Well,
Grant and I went
You've been there.
a million
Several times.
times.
Okay, so you moved
That's
away from
crazy.
that house, the rings were still in the wall.
Oh, yes. We were so young, we didn't realize, we knew that we wanted her to get her rings back, but it wasn't earth-shattering to us,
Yeah.
And Dad was so kind of mean, and he was probably tired, and I'm going to take those boards down. He said, they're not worth anything anyway. And what he did was he saw an ad on the back of a magazine for these rings, and I think he paid about $14 for them. But this was back in the
Yeah.
late 30s. It really wasn't that; it was sentimental.
Of course,
Yeah.
it's your wedding ring. Did he give the wedding rings to Grandma when they actually got married? Or
No,
was it later? Okay. Now, and they got married. Wasn't Grandma 14 when they got married?
she was 14 and he was, I think, 18.
But they didn't live together at first, or is that
No,
what I
he went to
remember?
Michigan to work,
Oh, okay.
and Mom was just kind of stayed at home with her parents at first. So
How
she
old
didn't
was
have
when she had
Billy.
Billy.
Well, it was a few years later because they were. It must have been about 3 or 4 years. I'd have to look at the dates.
So give us the list of your siblings from the oldest to the youngest, and maybe how far apart in age they were,
Okay.
generally speaking.
Our oldest one was Bill, and his name was Bill Monroe. Dad's middle name was Monroe. He was the oldest one, and I remember when I asked Dad to send me everything he could remember about his life. One of the things he told was that when Bill was born, he was so excited that he had a son that he went outside, and it was at night, and he just helped the baby up and just said, "Thanks God for giving me a son."
Oh, wow. That's
And
kind of cool.
so he had his moments.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's and most of us were born about 2 years apart.
Yeah.
And my next one was my brother Gerald Lawrence, and Lawrence was from my mother's side of the family. And then the next one was my sister Ann,
Okay.
Doris Ann, and she had allergies. They didn't know they were allergies, but she had allergies, and she cried all the time. And my dad was just so frustrated having that baby cry all the time. And so Mom got pregnant again, and he says, "Oh, I hope to goodness it's not a girl," because he'd had two
Just because she was a
boys.
girl that.
Yeah.
Hmm. 2 boys, and they were fine. And then he has Anne, and she just cries all the time. But we realize now that the poor baby was full of allergies and all kinds of stuff.
Probably colicky.
Yeah, and
Reflux.
and then I was born.
So,
I was.
you were next after Anne.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
We're only 22 months apart, and I was a good baby.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So it
that
was
just was so hard for me to say that nice
yes.
thing about myself. I had to force it
You
out.
didn't have acid reflux.
That's
so.
right.
And were the three so the three older than you, were they all born in Missouri, and then you were born in Lansing, or
No,
Did
back
you
and forth, back and forth.
Oh,
Like Anne was born in Missouri, and I think I'd have to look on the chart to find out. Bill was born in Missouri, and probably Gerald was too. But they're back and forth. And sometimes he'd go to Michigan, and Mom would stay with whoever.
somebody in Missouri?
About 2 years later or so, my brother Don, and his name was Don. It's spelled Delano, but he was named after President Roosevelt.
Right.
Delano.
Oh.
Don Delano. And it spelled it D-O-H-N, which was a torment to him all of his life because
Yeah.
everybody would spell it
And
D-O-N.
why did they do that? Have
I
they
don't
seen
know.
it before or something?
I don't know
It was
where
taken
they
after
got
John, maybe. Why does that have an H in it?
that. Maybe they didn't know how to spell Don. I don't know.
It could be.
Anyway,
rhymes with
he
John.
was a darling baby. Oh, baby Don, we called him.
Yeah.
And he had curly hair, blonde hair, and we'd make that little curl up on top of his head. We just loved him. And when Michael was born, the baby, and they named him Calvin, which is Grandpa Thornton's name, Calvin Michael
Oh,
Thornton.
so Michael's his middle
I
name.
didn't know that either.
Oh.
And his initials were CMT, just like Grandpa Thornton's. Calvin Monroe. His was Calvin Michael. Anyway, I was going to tell you kind of the tail end of that one where I said that Gerald pulled a knife
Oh,
on
yeah.
the teacher. And so he was at home for about a month until school ended, and the house was sort of enough for us to live in out in Moody. But Mom was expecting that baby any day. And we'd come home every day from school, walk through the woods, come down the hill, and Gerald would say, "Baby's not born yet." He was a big deal because he was at home. Finally, one day we came home and he says, "I'm not telling you if the baby's born or not." He was so mean. And then finally he did. He said, "Yes, baby boy." Oh, we were so excited. My dad was so thrilled over that baby, but we didn't have a bed or a crib or anything. So Dad went over and dumped out everything in the dresser drawer, and pulled the drawer out, and got a blanket and put in the bottom, and that was the bassinet.
Yeah.
And so that's where Michael slept. And I don't know that we ever got a bed for him. Probably not.
Well, I mean, the other babies, did you have cribs or bassinets for the other babies?
Yeah,
You just,
just whatever.
Just drawer or
And did your
whatever.
mom have her babies at home?
Yeah. I was the only
What a strong
child and 6 children that was born in a hospital.
Just
And
because
why
it was
were
in
you-
Lansing
Mhm.
when you were born.
And my dad was working for the automobile company and making good money. And we had kind of a nice house and a nice car. And I don't remember this, but Bill, my older brother Bill, remembers it. He said, "You know, it's so weird because here we are, we're doing pretty good, living in a nice house, got a car. And then all of a sudden, we're like, okay, we're selling everything and kids in the car and move them back to Missouri. And he never knew what,
Yeah.
What happened?
they didn't share with him. I thought of another story when I was going to Sylvan School. It was a one-room schoolhouse, painted white, and had a big playground. There was no grass, just dirt. There was a little girl, and I don't remember her name, but she was in the same grade as I was, and she kept wanting me to come home with her. And so I'd ask my mom, my little friend at school wants me to go stay overnight with her. And Mom said, no, I don't even know who she is or where she lives. Can't do that. And I asked her several times because the little girl kept pestering me. And finally, I just decided, I'm going to do that, even if Mom says no. So when school was out, my family and everybody who lived in that direction would go one way, and my little friend lived this way, and it was both going through woods. Mm-hmm. So we all, getting in our path and going home, and I went with this little girl, and my sister yells at me and says, "What? No, you're going the wrong way." No, I'm going home with, I'll call her Martha. Going home with Martha. No, Mom said you couldn't. I said, no, ask her. And she said, I can. Oh my gosh. So I went with her. And we walked through the woods and through the woods and through the woods. And then we went down a dry creek bed and up it. And it was so far. And I was starting to wish, oh my gosh, I wish I hadn't done this. And I was missing my mom, and I was missing my sister and my baby brother. And I thought we would never get to her house. Finally, we came to this hill, and at the top of the hill was this little house. And that was her house. And it was, I think, 3 rooms. So we went in the house, and oh my gosh, it was so messy and dirty. And there was just junk everywhere. And her brothers kept trying to show off because I was, company.
Which they probably didn't have much of.
Right. So, and then there were some leftover fried potatoes or something from a dinner, I guess. And the boys were eating it just right off the table. They didn't have plates. And then she said, well, I said, oh, could I see your bedroom? And because my sister and I had our own bedroom upstairs in the house we were renting. And so she took me in this room, and it was just full of old blankets and shoes and clothes, and in the midst of all that was a school book from the year before. And I thought, I picked it up, oh my gosh, that's a school book, and it was all torn up. And so then the parents got home after a while, and they had brought some bananas, and you would think it was Christmas. Those kids were so excited about the bananas. But I was just sick. I thought, how am I ever going to get home? I don't know how to get home. No telephones or anything. Pretty soon, I heard a car pull up. And it was my mother. And she had never driven. She didn't know how to drive, but she learned. She got
Right
in
then.
Yeah, right then. She found, because when they came home, they said, where's Edith? And, well, she went to so-and-so's house to spend the night, Martha. And she said, you told her that she could. And oh boy, Mom was so mad. And she grabbed up Michael and Don and put them in the car, and away she went. And so I don't know how she found her way to that house, but she did.
Probably the spirit led her there.
Yeah. And I knew I was going to be in trouble, but I didn't care. Bring it on.
Yeah.
You know.
Get me
Just
home.
Get me home.
Yes, I am so happy. So my mom got out of the car and she said, no, she didn't get out of the car because she wouldn't let the motor stop because, for
Oh,
fear
yeah,
she would
yeah.
have started. She said, get in that car. And I did. So I was sitting in the back seat, and my mom, we were all scared to death for one thing because she didn't know how to drive that car. She put in one gear, and that was it. But she didn't know how to shift. And if another car was coming, which wasn't that often because this is really backwoods, she would pull over to the side of the road and stop the car until the car went by. And then and it would drive through creeks, which was not uncommon, but it really scared us, and it scared her. Finally, we got home, and all the way there, I was saying, Mom, I'm so sorry I did that. And I was telling about that house, and how it was dirty, and her parents both worked, and the kids were there by themselves, and they were eating off the table. And Mom was just, she didn't have much to say. And so when we got home, oh my gosh, I just wanted to get on my knees and kiss the floor. It was so nice because it was a clean house, and she had dinner on the table. She had dried prunes that she put in water so that they plumped out, which is, they're not delicious, but they were that night.
Yeah.
And it just was, so glad to be home.
Yeah.
And I told her, and I don't think that she ever spanked me because I think she figured she learned a lesson.
Yeah.
But it made me so grateful to be home.
Wow.
I never, ever tried to pull something like that again.
I wish that we could hear that story from Grandma's perspective.
Oh, no
What,
kidding.
because I can't imagine, kids come home from school and one of the little kids is missing. Oh, yeah, she went over to so-and-so's house that you don't know who they are or
How far away
what
it
the
is.
heck's going on.
But
with
she
them.
had some kind of an idea that they were not where her daughter should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's about all I remember of Sylvan School. Anne found a picture of all the students. And it was the first day of school. I'm up in the front row, and my little boyfriend is right behind me. And even our brother Bill, who's the oldest, he and his lifetime love. I mean, they fell in love when they were young kids, and they married, and
Wow.
and that's an interesting story too. Anyway, it's a precious picture.
Yeah.
I've got to find it. I told you that we didn't have any windows or screens or anything. And Dad had built a kind of a lean-to on the back of the house because we didn't really have a room for our two older brothers because they usually gone
Like when you say they were usually gone, what do you mean?
working on a
Oh.
farm or something.
Where they used to live on the farm, isn't that what they used to
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
do
okay.
back then?
And they were already out of school by then, or they just quit school?
I think I don't remember.
Yeah, because that's funny.
I
As a
don't
little
remember.
kid, yeah, it's like why would you know the details of that? They're just gone.
Yeah,
Okay, go
yeah,
on.
they were gone. We didn't know where they were. I didn't know where they were. I'm sure Mom and Dad did.
Okay.
In fact, I think he probably helped Bill find the job with a farmer. And so when they did come home, he built that lean-to,
Mhm.
and it was really crude. and there were insects everywhere. And so one night, Bill woke up and there was a scorpion and it bit him.
Ooh.
Wow.
And he, of course, we just figured all scorpions were deadly, you know. And so he started yelling for Dad, and our dad came out, and everybody woke up. And we'd thought that our handsome brother was going to die before morning. We just thought that there's
Oh my gosh, how
inevitable.
horrible.
Dad was religious by this time, you know, and so he had joined that church, and they believed in consecrated oil and blessing and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So he got that oil, and I remember Bill had put overalls on just up to here, you know. He was just bare chested, and my dad anointed him with the oil and blessed him that he would be all right. And he was, but probably wasn't a poisonous scorpion
Yeah,
anyway.
like a bee sting.
But that was impressive.
Yeah.
Now I said the house was heated by a small heating stove in the living room, and it was a long way from being finished when we moved in. And I think I've already mentioned that. Dad had a well dug in the backyard. He built a pen for our cow and pig, and Mom washed our clothes with a scrub board and a wash tub. And she made our dresses and skirts from flour sacks. They'd have it printed, and it was a kind of a rough cotton, but, you know, that's what we had. And Mom would make us skirts out of it. She would make these little stitches, you know.
Yeah.
And we drink milk from our cow, and Mom made butter, and I told you that, in a mason canning jar, because we didn't have a butter churn. She'd dip the cream off, save the cream, and then when she got enough, then she would put it in a jar, and this is what she would do.
She'd shake it.
Mhm.
Oh.
Potatoes, beans, biscuits, canned tomatoes, oatmeal.
Didn't you say that when you would go to school and you'd have this packed lunch that, like, you'd have a biscuit and you would be embarrassed because it was...
Oh, it was like a hierarchy. If you were really from a wealthy family, which is a joke because none of them were wealthy,
Right. Relatively speaking.
you had a sandwich made from, we called it light bread.
Mhm.
The next notch down was biscuits, and that was acceptable, you know. The third was cornbread,
Oh,
and
interesting.
if you had to bring
Oh,
cornbread, oh boy, that was...
I think that's what I would have
Wow.
preferred over
I
all of
know,
them.
I know, but that's, like I say, that was a hierarchy, and you'd be real embarrassed with the cornbread, not want anybody to see what you had for your lunch. It's so silly because no matter what condition people are in, it's human nature to have
look
this
down on
hierarchy.
someone
Yeah,
else, yeah.
there's somebody's better and somebody's down here. And I remember if we had to bring biscuits, that wasn't really very great. Sometimes we had bread, but I refused to bring cornbread.
Yeah.
You'd go without
Oh, I
lunch.
didn't like cold cornbread anyway. My mom never had wax paper to wrap our sandwiches in, so they would stay fresh. So she'd just wrap them in a newspaper, tie a string around it. So by the time we got to lunchtime, the bread's pretty much dried out, and it was always peanut butter. Never had anything but peanut butter. And I remember the peanut butter would be kind of soaked into the bread and it'd all be hard. But I still like stale peanut butter sandwich.
It's nice that turned into a good
Yeah.
memory instead of...
Yeah, I mean, it did. Now, one day, my mom didn't have any kind of bread, cornbread, nothing for our lunch. And we lived about a mile and a half through the woods from the school. And Mom says, look, I'll bring lunch. I'll bake some of these sweet potatoes, and I'll bring you a hot lunch. And we're like, oh, okay. So lunchtime came, and all the kids are eating their lunch and out indoors playing. And Mom, true to her word, came to the school, and there was a fence. And we had to climb over the fence to get out and to go home. So anyway, she came to the fence, and we saw her, and I was so embarrassed that my mom had brought my lunch that I act like I wasn't hungry.
Oh,
And she had made it and walked there to bring it to you.
And she did too.
Oh my
So
God.
Anne wouldn't eat it, and well, none of us would except Gerald. Gerald was just like, he was just himself.
You got food here.
No funny stuff with him. And so he went over and ate one of the sweet potatoes, and I was so hungry, and it looked so good, but I would not dare go over and eat that food.
Oh, brother.
Oh, man.
So I went hungry all afternoon.
Silly.
But can you imagine her fixing that lunch? And she had a baby at home too. The big remedy when we were sick was to drink castor oil. Get the castor oil, that'll cure it. And that is the most repulsive, horrible, just a thick.
Mm-hmm.
So to disguise it, they would put it in either tomato juice
Oh.
or orange juice, depending on what we had. Now, orange juice would have been a special treat, but if we were sick, they would
Yeah.
probably gone to the store to get it.
Yeah.
Not frozen, but.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. They bought orange juice and brought it home, and Mom poured some castor oil in there.
Oh.
And I started drinking. Oh, good orange juice. I drank it in that big glop of castor oil. To this day, I cannot stand orange juice.
That's
and I think that's the
terrible.
reason.
Good grief.
At Sylvan School, we had, well, they had them in all schools. We had pie suppers to raise money for the schools. And it was a big social event that we all looked forward to. Because what you did was you have a box, maybe about that size. And we would go to the grocery stores whenever we're there. If they had an empty, because the candy bars and stuff would come in these boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we needed to have a box to decorate. And that was always a big deal. Where are we going to come up with a box? And so on. Or you could use a shoebox, which we didn't have. So anyway, we used crepe paper to decorate it. And some people got really fancy. They had sewing machines, and they would make ruffles to go around the edge of the the box. And they would pad it here, and then crepe paper over it, and then make little roses and sweet peas and that kind of, make them really were pretty. And right around here where they would sew it and gather it, pleat it or whatever, they would put some kind of ribbon or tinsel or something to cover the stitches up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I just thought those were so beautiful. Well, what we had was paste made out of flour and water.
Oh, yeah.
You can imagine what that crepe paper looked like. And the way we made it ruffle was we would stretch the
Oh,
one
yeah.
end,
Yeah.
and so we would take our box. Now, you could have a box. It was either a pie supper or a box supper or both. And in our school, we just have either one. If it was a box, it was a dinner. Maybe a piece of fried chicken, mashed potatoes, whatever. It was a meal. Or if it was just a pie, it was a pie, and you could eat the whole pie, you and your partner. Anyway, they'd have an auctioneer, and he would pick the boxes up and start, oh, do I have 25 cents, 10 cents, whatever. And then hopefully, if it was decorated very pretty, and especially if it was a box, because that meant there's meal in there.
Yeah.
Mashed potatoes, fried chicken or something. And but ours was always a pie. And I was so excited because my boyfriend was there, my little Marvin Dale, little boyfriend. And I wanted so much for him to buy my pie.
Do they
Well-
know who they belong to?
I can't remember if I let him know. I think I did. But his dad was, we always joked about it. He was the stingiest man ever. And he was so wealthy. He owned so much land.
Gosh.
I mean, when he died,
Figures.
his kids are all wealthy from that land. They've sold it off and stuff. And one of the girls married my brother. So we had that connection. But he wasn't going to give Dale any money to buy a pie.
Yeah.
So some old farmer man bought mine. I had to sit there. And so then what we did was when all the pies, cakes were sold, then everybody would find their partner, and then they would sit in the little school desks and eat.
Yeah.
And I was very sad because,
You just sit with an old farmer.
yeah.
You had to sit with the person who bought your.
Yeah, that was what
It
it
reminds
was.
me of that movie Oklahoma when they had
Yeah.
the
That was
auction.
the whole idea, was that you hope that some
Yeah,
handsome person
yeah.
would buy your pie or whatever. He was a nice man, but I was just a little girl.
What kind? Do you remember what kind of pies you would make?
Oh, it would have to be raisin pie.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I mean,
Or-
raisins, were they plentiful?
They were a staple for my mom.
Okay, yeah.
Raisin cookies, and
Raisin cookies.
so it would have to be that, or I don't know what other pie. If she had fruit, she could have made an apple pie. So anyway, that was a very entertaining thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when we were living in this this house on top of the hill, my dad came home one day and he said, they're having a special meeting at the school. Not our school, but it was a Renfro school, and so farther away. And the superintendent of the district was going to be there. And Dad wanted to hear the speech. Because I guess it was something about getting some kind of something passed, Some reason Dad wanted to be there. So he just came home from work and he said, to Mom, well, get the kids ready. We're going to go over to school and hear that talk. And so we had to hustle around. Well, I had no socks. It was always my problem. I never had socks. We had 2 girls in the family, 4 boys, and Dad. They all had socks. But why wouldn't they spend money to be
Yeah, girls.
little anklets for the girls? So
Probably
anyway,
because boys needed to work, so they had to
Yeah.
have clothes and shoes
Yeah.
and socks, and girls were just.
there you go.
Yeah.
We'll say that.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, how can I go? I don't have any socks, or they're in the wash. I probably had 1, 2 pair, and Mom says, "You kids, hurry up, get ready." So I got an idea that we had an old shoe, we had a bag that we put things like rags and stuff in, and there was a sheet in there. It was pretty good size, but it was worn. So I got that sheet and I tore it in strips. I'd seen my mom do that when she needed a bandage for us, And I thought, I will tear this sheet into strips and I will wrap my feet and just tell everybody that I've got a hurt foot. And they
Both
won't
of
know
your
the
feet are-
difference. They won't know the difference. They won't know I don't have socks on. And I thought, you know what? That was the first sign that I had the ability to put substitute things, you know,
For
like go to
outfits.
DI when you don't have money and come out with a good outfit and so on.
Uh-huh.
So I had my socks, and so I remember sitting there in that school, looking down, see if my bandages were still okay. I can't remember Mom's reaction. Dad, him paying any
Probably
attention,
didn't even
but
notice.
I think Mom was probably humiliated that I had, but really they just looked like bandages. As
Yeah.
far as I was concerned, they did.
Probably nobody even noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a couple of ways of earning money as little kids, way out in the country. One was when blackberries were in season, we could get a large bucket and go out and pick blackberries. And the other was to pick cotton, but not that was in Dudley when we picked cotton. But anyway, that was the two ways that we could earn money. And so we went out berry picking with Mom, and you'd wear your brother's jeans or overalls or something because, snakes and all kinds of bad stuff. And so that was kind of fun, getting a pair of overalls. And Mom would save the lard buckets so that we would have them. And so this one time it was the fences along the road would have blackberry vines, and when they were in season, they were just loaded with blackberries.
It's like how they are in Oregon.
Uh-huh.
Oh, that'd be so
And-
awesome.
So we would pick those blackberries and take them into town. The town consisted of a mail or a post office, a gas station, and half of the gas station had a few groceries and a post office. That's what made it a town, was a post office.
Right.
But that grocery store would buy our blackberries because other people would come in and they'd sell them.
Mhm.
And so we went into town with our blackberries, and I sold mine, and I had enough money to buy a pair of socks, and that's what I wanted. So I bought socks, but you know what the sad thing about it is? They were too small when I got home. They didn't fit. I stretched and stretched and stretched them.
Oh.
I try to forget that because that still bothers me.
Oh, really?
And
And it's
Another
not like
thing-
you had a younger sister to hand it down to
no,
either.
no. I think they didn't have my size,
Yeah.
and I just thought I can squeeze into them,
Yeah. Oh, darn.
And one time, and maybe the same time, we'd go across the street. I think there used to be a separate grocery store, little, and post office here, because we would go across the street from selling the blackberries. And then over here at the filling station, they had one of these old-fashioned things filled with ice where you keep the pop.
Mhm.
It's cold.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we spend part of our money and get a bottle of pop. I like to get the strawberry, orange crush, or strawberry, or grapette, and hold it up to the sun,
Let's see through.
and they look so
Great
pretty.
colors.
Yeah.
The sun
Yeah.
shining through those bottles. I remember that more than I remember how the pop tastes.
That's so cool. It's so amazing that life was so simple back then.
I
That
know.
would be
But
such an
magical.
excitement.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing to compare it to.
Yeah.
So you don't even know there's something.
Right.
More.
Right. Yeah.
But no, that was such a treat. I really loved the strawberry pop. And I loved the grapette, but I didn't like the grapette because it was in a little bottle.
Oh,
Did
really?
you ever know that?
No.
Oh, well, if you went to that store in St. George,
Down, yeah, where they
Judd's,
sell the old
yeah,
sodas.
they have a grapette, and it's just a
It's
way
little.
they name it grapette. It's just a way of somebody's
Getting away with selling a
yeah,
small amount of pop.
yeah,
for
make more money.
Yeah.
But we just thought those bottles were so cute, but not much pop in them. So anyway, that was some fun things I remember. And we had a little friend. He wasn't very little. He was tall and skinny, and he lived. This is still the house that Dad built.
Mm-hmm.
He was the last of a large family, youngest one. So his parents were really old.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of the kids are married and they're living somewhere else. So that what little money they had, Dwayne would have plenty of money to spend when they went to town, which town was Moody that I just described. And they did not have a car, but they did have a horse and a wagon, flatbed, with the two people sitting up front.
Mm-hmm.
And so Mr. and Mrs. Matlock would always let us come with them. And Dwayne always had money to spend. And he would buy us candy. Yeah, he was very generous. And we'd go along that road, and there's creeks. And we were sitting on the edge of the bed, wagon bed, and dangle our feet in the water. And this was so fun. That was summer fun. But when I think about it, okay, we were going barefoot to the store. Didn't think anything about it.
Yeah.
But that's one of my memories. And so one time Dwayne got the fancy idea, let's form a club. You know how little kids are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always want
Always want to do a club. Yeah.
Form a club. Dwayne was going to be president of the club because he was the one that had the money to buy the ribbons. So he bought some red, white, and blue ribbons. And we cut them into little things where we could pin them on anyone who had a red, white, and blue pin was a member of our club. Now, what was the club?
What was the club?
Who knows? It was just a club.
It was wearing red, white, blue ribbon.
That's right. And I years later, I went back and I saw Dwayne because it was close to, not that far from West Plains, which was the big county seat and so on. And I saw him working as a soda jerk in the drugstore. And then on the next visit or whatever, a later visit, I heard that he was paying his way through college. And so he graduated from college and he got a really good job with a computer company. I mean, it was so interesting to see this kid who wore overalls constantly, no shirt, overalls. I mean, nothing underneath, okay?
Yeah.
You get my drift. I remember a story about the mulberry tree. On the way home, this is where when we lived, we're in the house that Dad built. And it was about maybe 1/3 of the way home, there was an orchard and a huge mulberry tree. And when they were ripe, we loved to climb over the fence and climb that tree and pick mulberries. So one time we were so hungry and we were on our way home from school, but we didn't have a bucket or anything to put the mulberries in. So I said, I'll hold my skirt out like this, and you guys climb up the tree and drop the mulberries in, which they did. And I carried them all the way home, dress full of mulberries. And we got home, and my dress, and it was one of two dresses, okay? And the mulberry stain was all over the front of it, which didn't come out. So my mom wasn't very happy about that, but she made a wonderful blueberry or mulberry cobbler. So it was kind of worth
So
it.
what your mom should have done is taken that dress and put it in a bunch of mulberries,
Yes.
And made the whole thing that beautiful color.
just like what you do with your clothes now.
Yeah, that's true. And then also, I saw the biggest snake I have ever seen, except in a zoo. We climbed over the fence to the mulberry tree. It's a different time. And the weeds were high. And I'm hopping through those weeds, and there was a snake all curled up enjoying the sun. It must have been that big around.
Do you know what
Oh
kind?
my
Oh.
word.
Do you know what kind of snake it was?
No, I didn't stick around long enough. But I just,
Ooh, ooh.
and I got out of that field really quick. When the sawmill was no longer making any money, well, he had a partner, and the partner was always going on vacation to California or somewhere, and Dad got disgusted with that because Dad was a really hard worker. So he sent him a telegram and said, buy or sell. And he thought he would sell it to Dad. But he didn't, he bought it, which left Dad out of, a job or whatever. And so all of a sudden, Dad wants to move, to sell everything and move really fast. And so he sold the sawmill, the land, the house, the furniture, even kitchen utensils, everything.
Oh my gosh. So you guys went with nothing.
With nothing. And so then we moved back to Dudley, always back to Dudley, because there's, they both have a background there, and there's a few relatives around. And it's where Mom and Dad grew up. So then Dudley was the school that I attended. I think I was telling you before. It was a 3-room brick building, fairly new. And now we're talking about probably around the late 40s. And my brother Bill had joined the Navy when he was 17, and he was stationed on Guam Island during I don't think there was a war going on when he was in the military. Then in 49, it was my sister, Doris Ann, was old enough to go to high school. Now, to go to high school, we had to take a bus to the next town, because there was no high school in Dudley. And the bus would come every morning, pick up everybody and take them, and then back home in the evening. And that was a big deal to get old enough to go to high school, because, they had sports there, and you could go to their basketball games and all that fun stuff. So I was excited for Ann to be in high school. And Ann and I had watched the movie State Fair with Jeannie Crane and Dana Andrews. And movies like that. I don't know if that one was out yet, but movies like that. And we had an ideal and a dream that we were just going to do wonderful things with our lives. Well, Mom and Ann were sitting out in the front yard talking, and they were like really serious, and their heads were together, and I went out to find out what was going on. And Ann was crying, and it turns out that it was going to be just that next week that school started, high school. But she had to pay a fee of $2.50. And my dad would not pay it.
Oh.
I don't know if he didn't have the $2.50. It's hard to believe that you wouldn't have $2.50. Or did he anticipate that she was going to be going to high school? Probably not. He said he didn't have the money, and besides, it wasn't important for a girl to go to high school. And so when I found out that she couldn't go, I just absolutely sobbed and cried and sobbed. And when Mom saw, that it was so hard on me and Ann, she made up a plan that she would go pick cotton because in those schools they have well, they probably still do. I don't know if they do anymore because they've got machinery, but they pick the cotton. But the farmers who made a living with cotton, they would have a school vacation, a cotton vacation it was called. So you start school, then when the cotton's ready to pick, you get a 6-week cotton break.
Mm-hmm.
And so Mom made up the plan that she would go pick cotton during that 6 weeks and get that $250 fee paid, and Ann could go to school. So we all
So
felt,
school would have already started.
well, yeah,
But then she would start after the 6
Yeah.
weeks.
but it wouldn't be disastrous because I don't know when school started, but it wasn't that long. And also, it was a small school, and, they would be glad to have a pretty girl like Ann. She earned at least that much, and I think she earned a little more. And Mom made her some dresses, so she had
Oh.
new clothes to wear,
That's awesome.
and that was a happy ending. Well, there was a period of time. Remember, I told you the story of how my sister wasn't going to be able to go to high school because Dad wouldn't pay the $250 fee. And so my mom, it was cotton picking time on cotton vacation. So she just decided she would pick the cotton and earn the money. Well, that was something that we could do during the reaping time, I guess you call it, to earn a little extra money. Believe me, it was very little. They didn't pay you very much. But I used to pick cotton if I just wanted some money to go to a movie or buy some fabric or something. I would pick cotton. But I didn't really know a lot about picking cotton. And so I had heard these people talk in the trucks. What they would do is their truck would come into town. We're supposed to be at a certain spot, kind of like the
Migrant workers.
migrant workers do now. And they were supposed to be there at that one place, and then they would come with their pickup truck, and we just all load in.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'd be talking about how much cotton they picked, and well, so-and-so, he's really a fast picker, and I think he puts a few bowls in there, weights the bag down, and tell you the truth. And so I'm just listening to all this, and I'm a little kid, And so I got out there with my little cotton sack, and I thought, I'm going to start adding some bowls to mine. Earn more money, and they do it. Well, it was weigh-in time. So everybody's weighing in, he's writing it down. So he gets to my bag and weighs it and dumps it out, and here's all these green bowls come rolling out of the bag. What? Who's been putting green bowls? And everybody just like, oh
like you're the
gosh.
only person that's ever done that, right?
Well, no, I was the only person dumb enough to do it because that's not what they do. It's when you reach down and get your ball of cotton out of the bowl.
You're supposed to
dry.
just take the cotton.
Yeah, and the sometimes they'll grab it and the bowl, the dried up bowl that's holding the cotton will break off, and they just stick it in
And
their
that
bag.
adds more weight. Okay.
Well, I thought they were talking about just throwing in those green
my
bowls.
Goodness.
And they're heavy. Well, my mother was so humiliated. Somebody said, well, isn't that Edith's bag? Well, no, I don't think Edith would do something like that. Well, I don't know. And so they found out it was my bag, and my mom was so embarrassed.
Oh, man.
And I was so ashamed. I couldn't face anybody. But I thought I had a real business going there. Hey, this picking
Mine's
cotton's
the
not
heaviest
so bad.
bag here.
Yeah. And we used to get, for lunch, we'd have to take our own lunch, a loaf of white bread and a can of Vienna sausage. That was a wonderful lunch.
I think of Vienna sausage when we were on the train.
Train and pickles. That lady
Yeah.
had pickles too.
On the train going to visit Grandma Thornton.
Oh,
we
yeah,
went into
yeah.
the bathroom on the train, and there was this cute little old woman in there eating her lunch, and she had Vienna sausages and pickles. And we were little. I think we probably just stood there staring
Just
at her.
watching her.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, she was like, "Would you like some of this?" She gave us some.
Like, oh, these are good. I don't think I'd ever had them
No, I
before.
hadn't.
No, you hadn't, but I think I still like Vienna sausage.
Mm-hmm.
And a slice of white bread. In 1950, my brother Bill married his high school sweetheart. Now, do you remember who she is?
Yeah, the family that owns all that land.
Mm-hmm. Stevens, Betty Ann Stevens. And do you remember who my little boyfriend was? Marvin Dale.
Marvindale, okay.
But we called him Dale after we got a little older. Anyway, he was my little boyfriend, and he would give me a beautiful Valentine. I don't know where he got the money from his dad to buy a Valentine, but he did. His dad was so tight with money, but, I guess it paid off for him. So anyway, Bill and Betty got married. Bill was in the Navy, and so Betty Ann, after they were married, they moved out to where he was stationed in California. And that was a big event in our family, that our older brother was married and living in California. When we were growing up, Ann and I, through our teen years, both Mom and Dad were working. And Mom was a practical nurse. Did I tell you the story of how she got her certificate to be a practical nurse?
No.
I will. Mom was a practical nurse and Dad was a contract painter. And so he bought a small 5-room house from Ralph Smothers, which is my mom's cousin. And that's when we moved to Poplar Bluff permanently. Mom wanted to be a nurse. So she found a magazine, or something came in the mail advertising this correspondence course to become a practical nurse. And you order it and you pay so much money, the lessons come and so on. And you didn't have to have money up front. So she ordered it. And she was so excited. We were all excited. So the lessons came, and she got worried because they started sending her bills for that first lesson, and she didn't have any money. So she worked on that, and she would practice on us, on the children, the 3 little ones. And one thing was to learn how to give a back rub and bandage. So she would line up my sister and my brother Don on the floor. Okay, lay down. I'm going to practice giving you a back rub. So she would get the, I don't know if we had lotion or not, but whatever, probably Jergens. And she would give us all back rubs. So she practiced that. And then she had to learn to do different bandages. So she had us all wrapped up in bandages. And that's how she learned it. And I don't know, the big deal was, how are we going to get enough money to pay for Mom's nursing school? My dad was out of town on his church stuff. He was traveling, yeah. He was traveling. You know too much. He was traveling for the church, and they paid him an allowance. And actually, well, I don't like to say, well, yeah, I do like to say this, but I shouldn't, but I'm going to. My dad liked to have all the attention, and he got pretty much what he wanted, and so he was a good preacher, and he was very convincing and so on, so he had a lot of people interested, and they would take up donations and so on. And then they would buy him a new suit new tie, white shirts, and so on. And so he was pretty well outfitted, but we didn't have anything.
So he dressed all nice, and you guys.
Well, yeah, all right. In fact, I remember, I think I did tell you the story about Mom. She didn't have any dress. Well, she had one dress, but it was all kind of torn in the front and stuff. And we had some company that pulled up, and Mom had to go to bed and pretend to be sick because she didn't have a dress to wear.
Man.
But Dad had a new suit. I don't know. I really don't know how we did it, how we paid for it, or if we paid for it. You know, she may have scraped up enough money to get another lesson or whatever. But she got a certificate, and she was a practical nurse. So when we moved to Poplar Bluff is still kind of a medical center of southeastern Missouri, and it's got about 4 to 5 hospitals. So she didn't have any trouble getting a job, and so she had that money. And by this time I'm in high school, and it was a big relief for her to be able to earn some money. This kind of leads up to when I meet the missionaries, because by this time I was about 14 when I met the missionaries, and the way I met them was they were out tracting just door to door, and they tracted this one house, and it happened to be my best girlfriend's house. We lived here, and she lived like down there. And they started with the approach of archaeology, talking about the Book of Mormon and the ruins and so on. And that just happened to be a subject that my girlfriend's mother was fascinated by. So when they started talking about that, she invited them in, and they started teaching her. And she liked them. They were young. You know how we all like the missionaries.
Yeah.
And I was 14, and they were about 21, something like that. And it was in February that I started taking the lessons. We decided to have a party. I was in February. It was probably a Valentine party or some such thing. And it happened to be the same night that she was having these missionaries over.
The party was?
Yeah.
Oh.
It was at her house. And she said, well, you can have it, but you're going to have to do it outdoors because I've got guests coming. The kids all came, and we played some games, 14, 15, you can imagine. I think we played one kissing game. And I always got this kid that had fat, squishy lips.
Ew. Nice.
Oh, I wasn't interested. They were like 2 worms put together.
Oh. Oh.
After the party, the kids probably went home kind of early. And this was about in 52. And so we went in the house, and they were in the living room having the discussion. And my girlfriend and I just came in. Well, my girlfriend she lived there. And so we just quietly sit down in the dining room chairs, and the lights were out in there so that nobody knew we were in there, and we were just listening because the mother had threatened us because interrupt this discussion. And so the missionaries talked about the Book of Mormon, and I couldn't contain myself. So I just blurted out, Book of Mormon. You can imagine from the dark, this part. Book of Mormon, we have one of those at our house. And so the missionary said, oh, really? Well, would you like to come in and tell us how you got it and so on? Yeah. My dad's church has the Book of Mormon, and they wanted to know more about my dad's church. And I couldn't really tell them a whole lot because I didn't know a whole lot about it. I just knew that we had a Book of Mormon in our house And it's the only place I'd ever seen a Book of Mormon or
Did
heard
you
of
guys
it.
read the Book of Mormon, or you just had it?
As a family, we didn't do anything as a family.
Okay.
We're just a bunch of individuals, you know.
Yeah.
But my dad, at this point, my dad still preached from the Book of Mormon. And that attracted a lot of people because it was new and different, the idea of more
Mhm.
scriptures, you know.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, the two missionaries that I met that night was Elder Mark Cloward, who now lives in the Bountiful area, and Elder Glenn King.
Is he still alive?
I'm going to find out. He came to see me on his 80th birthday, which was a couple of years ago. And I just don't know. At our age, you know, we could go anytime, anytime. So anyway, we became good friends, and they wanted to know some of the things that my dad's church taught, and I didn't really know a whole lot about it because he didn't share that with us. I just knew they had the Book of Mormon. The thing that saved me was my mother's example of prayer. It wasn't anything that my dad taught me. But the fact that he had the Book of Mormon in the house also kind of directed me in that way. So they asked if I would like to come back the next week. And I said, yeah, I'd love to. So they were real happy because they got a new contact, you know. So they taught me that second lesson, and I've still got the visual aid at home. That was back when they used these colored pencils. And they had a little notebook. And he drew, you know, the plan of salvation with the 3 degrees and
This was even
the
before
familiar
the
one.
flannel board thing, huh?
Yeah, we didn't have, well, they didn't have flannel boards. I think there were flannel boards in existence, but they didn't have any. And so anyway, I just thought, oh my gosh, that is so exciting. We lived before we came to this earth. And I just was so fascinated by it. I loved it. And so I just kept going. And I came home one week, one Saturday night. My dad was working out of town during the week, but he would come home on weekends. And I just burst into the house after the meeting. I was so excited. And I said, oh, man, I am learning. I didn't say cool because that wasn't in. I am learning the neatest things. And my mom and dad are like, what? And I said, well, I've been meeting with the Mormon missionaries, and they've been telling me these wonderful things. Well, you know, my dad exploded. And he said, I know about Mormon missionaries. And what they teach is not true. And I can tell you some really bad stories about them. And I was so crushed.
Did he give you literature too?
He did, yeah. He had some in his desk. Anti-Mormon pamphlets. They're just really gross. And he says, you read these and you won't have anything else to do with the Mormon church. And he also said, you know, those Mormon missionaries, they send them out. The church sends them out, and then they, in exchange for going on a mission, they set them up in business once they get back home.
Oh my gosh, wouldn't that be nice?
No kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they have to find something, you know.
Yeah.
Why would they be willing to go, you know? So anyway, I told them that, and they got a chuckle out of that. But so I kept going. I thought, I got to find out what's so horrible about these guys. They seem pretty nice to me. So I went back for more lessons, and finally, the missionary said, well, you know, your father's teaching you this, and we're teaching you this, and you're a little mixed up. Have you actually prayed about which church is right? And I said, well, no, I haven't. And they said, well, you get on your knees and ask the Lord which church is true, because you've been reading, you've been, learning and so on, and the Spirit will manifest to you which church is right. But I can tell you right now, it's this church, So I agreed to do that. And it took a while before I could find a place, not a place, but a time to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of late at night. And my sister and I shared a bedroom with our baby brother. And I knelt and prayed. And I just said, just a simple prayer. The missionaries have taught me these things, and they tell me that what they teach me is truth, but my dad says it's not true. And I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to believe that my dad's lying to me. But on the other hand, I love what they're teaching. It just sounds so wonderful. So anyway, it was just a simple plea. And when I got through with that prayer, it was the second experience in my life where the Spirit spoke to me, not in verbally like I'm doing, but it was, if you read in the book of Enos, the Spirit spoke to his mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the Spirit did. But it was very important. The words were very important. It was that the true church was restored in 1830. Well, my dad's church taught that they were established in 1929, and they taught that Joseph Smith did receive authority to translate the Book of Mormon, but he was never called to be a prophet and to form a church. And so when he did that on his own, he became a fallen prophet. Mm-hmm. And then, about 100 years later, John the Baptist appeared to this guy that started their church, Otto Fetting. And so that was very clear. Their church started in 1929. And I had my answer.
So that was something personalized to you, because
yeah, it was. It was just, well, it was so cool because it's like the Lord knew, Spirit knew what to say to me, to prompt me in just the right way. The true church was restored in 1830. It's just customized for me. Mm-hmm. It was really, I didn't need to know which of all the churches in the world were true. In my mind, it was either my dad's church or it was this Mormon church. And that's the way he answered it. So I got my answer, and I couldn't wait to tell the missionaries. So next time I saw him, and I can't remember, it probably was just a few days later, or it might have been at the next meeting, I said, I prayed, I did what you said, and I know which church is true, and I want to be baptized. And I was so excited, but they weren't as excited as I was. And I thought, what's wrong? And they said, well, the problem is that we have to have your dad permission to baptize you because you're only 14. And you have to be 18 to do that without your parents' permission. Oh, my heart sunk. I thought, there is no way that my dad is going to give them permission because he's so against it. So they said, well, let us go visit with your dad. And I said, oh, boy. Because he just loved to find, especially Mormon missionaries. And because they're young, my dad had been preaching for years and years, and he knew the Bible. And he could just kind of get them against the wall, seal them up and spit them out.
Yeah.
And because they were just not that used to arguing about that. My dad was real good at it. He was a good speaker, very convincing. And so anyway, so I I was afraid of what would happen. So they called my dad and they got the appointment. And my girlfriend's parents were going to a nearby town where her uncle lived to visit for, I think it was Sunday, might have been Saturday night and Sunday. And I said, can I go with you?
Get me out of here.
Yeah. As far away as I can get. And so, yeah, you can go. And so I did go. And I told her, I said, I just afraid, what my dad's going to do. And she was wanting to be baptized too. So I got back and I talked to the missionaries and they said, the strangest thing happened. We fasted when we went to see your dad, fasted and prayed. And he said, I know that she's making a wrong decision, but it's her life, and I'll let her find that out for herself. I mean, that was opposite of what I thought he would say.
Well, it didn't seem like his personality either.
No, it wasn't. Compromise, no. And, but I guess those two young missionaries, so pure and dedicated and armed with the priesthood and the truth, my dad just couldn't, he just didn't have what it took to be aggressive against them. He just kind of melted. So after that, we just made plans, and Mom bought me a white skirt and I said, I have to have a white dress to be baptized in. Anything to get a new dress, But so she did buy me a white blouse and a white skirt. And so I was baptized on the 22nd of June. And Pat...
And the year?
1952. And my friend Pat was baptized. And I think my friend Betty was baptized.
The same day?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, she Betty was, I haven't talked much about her, but her parents were members of the church, but she just had never been baptized and wasn't active or anything, but she did lead the music once in a while, and so she got baptized that same day. Mm-hmm. We started going to church, and we met in it was really a rundown building. Poplar Bluff has a lot of rundown buildings. And it was way off of the main highway, and so it was cheap, in other words. And it didn't have any heat. There was a heating stove in the middle. And there was one room, and then there was a side room here and a porch here. And so those were the classrooms. And
reminds me of Kerrville.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't anything fancy. It wasn't anything, and the people who had joined the church were really poor, mostly farmers, uneducated, and that didn't bother me. Mm-hmm. I was so excited about the teachings and so on, and the elders missionary elders gave me, and I still have it, an Articles of Faith book by Talmage. And I just read that book and read it. And my mom was working at the hospital, and she got me a part-time job working up there. And I would earn, on the weekends, maybe $3, $4 if I worked the whole weekend. one night, maybe $2.50. But I would take that money and order books from Deseret Book. I don't know how I ever did that.
Oh my goodness.
How did I even know the address of Deseret Books?
Wow.
How did you mail? Did you mail cash? Probably.
Money order, I bet.
Huh.
Anyway, I didn't know, what, but the elders did kind of guide me about what
Yeah,
books.
they probably gave you information
Yeah,
on how
I just don't remember it. But one book I got was called Added Upon. And it was just a little book. And it was less, it's about like this, about that size. And remember I told you that the first lesson that just excited me so much was the premortal life that we had lived before and so on. And that's what that book about.
I've got that book. I've read that book.
Oh, is it still little?
Yeah, I had no idea that was an important book to you.
It's not my book, is it?
No. Glenn's mom gave it to me.
Do you have your copy?
I don't.
Oh.
I wish I did. Yeah, and the missionaries gave me the best book for a new convert was the Articles of Faith, because it teaches you the basic teachings and so on. But there was that one, and then there was another little book I ordered on the 12 tribes of Israel. And it was just a simple, really for a child. And I ordered that, and I read that, and I tried to memorize all the 12 tribes and stuff like that. So that's how I joined.
That to me is just amazing.
It
that
is.
You're 14 years old, and I mean, same age as Joseph Smith. Most 14-year-olds, they're not thinking about religion and.
Well, and the thing is, if I had not joined the church, if I had not found the church and joined it, then, because if my dad didn't give me permission, I have to wait till I was 18. Now that's 4 more years.
That's a long time. Yeah.
I would have gone astray because all my friends did. They went doing some drinking and immorality and that kind of thing. And I might have gone off that path. But fortunately, the Lord brought the gospel to me from these 2 missionaries before I got to the point where I was gone astray.
Did your mom go to your baptism? Did any of your family go to your baptism?
I didn't think they did, but Ann told me she was there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. She and her girlfriend drove out there at the Cane Creek, and that's neat.
That is neat.
Yeah.
What did Anne think about you being an active Mormon?
What did Ann think? Well, she had married Roger, who was Catholic, and she had to join the Catholic Church because of that. And I don't know that I don't know. Every church that Ann joined, I think that she's basically a religious person. So I think that she did embrace the Catholic religion for a while. But the missionaries came over to the house to teach Ann. Because they said, "What about your sister?" I said, "Well, you're welcome to come in." But she was not interested. She says, "Edith, do you know what would happen to me if I joined the Mormon church? I wouldn't have any friends anymore at school. Because it's looked down on, And so she wasn't interested. However,
She is
many,
now.
many years she did.
Yes.
And as soon as I came into the church, I started praying for my sister and my mother. I didn't pray for Dad because it seemed like it was just too much, too much to ask. But my mom, in later years, became very interested in the church, was reading all the scriptures and so on. But she never got baptized, but I had her baptized afterwards. And then Anne, a lot of things happened in her life, and eventually she was baptized. So
And then also, since we're talking about, you doing the baptism for your mom, and yeah, that part. Remember when Anne called you and she had had a dream?
mhm.
Tell
Yeah,
about
about our mom.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, this was, of course, after Mom had passed away, and I was living out in Utah, and she called and she says, "Edie, I've had the strangest dream about Mom." And Anne is kind of like our mother in that she just kind of has an openness, and she'll get promptings and have dreams that have significance and things.
Mhm.
And she says, I dreamed that we were on the other side with Mom, and she just looked so beautiful, and she was young and happy, and she was showing us around. And she was showing, oh, here's this and here's this. And we went so far, and then she said, oh, I can't go any farther. I'll have to turn around and go back. So she says, I don't understand this, because she turned around and she went back because she couldn't go any farther. And I knew what it was, because I had all the information to do her work for her, and I was working over at Ivy, Work Perfect,
Mhm.
and I just hadn't gotten around to it. And I just cried. And Anne says, why are you crying? What's wrong? And I said, well, and she didn't really understand, because she wasn't a member yet,
Mhm.
She didn't understand. And I said, well, I have all the work to do my mom's work, and all the information. And I just have been putting it off, And she's saying in a very gentle way, I can only go so far.
She was getting through to who she could get through to.
Mm-hmm. Which was her daughter.
Yeah.
And so I had that work done as soon as I could. And Anne, not being a member, didn't really understand. Later she did, but at the time she was like, it's really mysterious to her.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that brought her any comfort about the dream or not, but I said, well, I understand it. And I don't know that the dream was for you, it's for me, because I'm the one who has the information and can go to the temple and so on. So then I just, as soon as I got out of high school, I had plans to go to BYU, but I didn't know how in the heck I was going to do it, because I didn't have any money. But we were working at the hospital. Betty also worked at the hospital. And we were saving our money, because we were going to go to Utah and get an apartment. And we even called the LDS hospital and told them that we had experience being a nurse's aide. And they said, well, when you're in town, just come and put your application in, because, we always need help. So as soon as high school was out, we had saved enough money to make a trip to Utah. I think Betty did better than I did saving money. But I did put a set of white luggage in layaway. I had no suitcase. And so I went to the store, and I don't remember what store it was, but I got a big suitcase and then kind of a medium one and a hat box. Hat boxes were really in style in the 50s. Audrey Hepburn.
Yes, yeah.
And that's where I put all my makeup and stuff. So I put them in layaway. Well, just a few days before we were going to go, I had the money. I went over and I paid my last payment, but I had to take the bus home. And here I've got this 2 suitcases in my hat box. But I was so excited, and I came home and Dad was there. And I said, Mom, Dad. No, I didn't say Dad. I said, Mom, come see the beautiful luggage I bought. And Dad got so mad. He says, I don't know why my kids think they have to try and be something they're not.
Oh my goodness.
Oh.
So,
Just because you had that
fancy
luggage.
white luggage.
You were going to go places.
Okay, so
And I did. And
when
I
you
am.
got the luggage, how soon after that did you guys take off to?
Oh, it was close. I mean, it was within it. We were going out for the fall semester, and or quarter it was called, and that started in, I think, September. So it was probably in August or something, because we had to find an apartment, and we didn't know if we would make it for the fall quarter or not. But that was our goal, was to go to BYU.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got in Salt Lake, and we started looking for apartments. And we went up First Avenue, and there's all these old homes. And one of the old homes said apartment for rent. And it was this picturesque brick, beautiful house. And Betty and I both just were so excited to think that we could live there. So we went and knocked on the door, and it was a little old lady, a widow. And she showed us the apartment. And it was just really one room and a little room for kitchen with a sink and everything, and then a bathroom. But in the living room, they had a hide-a-bed that pulled down at night, and in the daytime put it up, and then you got a little living room.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sounds cute.
we asked her how much rent, and it was reasonable. We didn't know what was reasonable. We just knew we had enough money to pay first month's rent. And it was close to the hospital, So we rented it, and that was so exciting. But we didn't have enough money for school. We were working at the hospital, trying to save our money. But the first thing we had to do to that apartment was paint it a different color. I don't know what color it was, but we thought we have to paint it. And so we spent money on paint. And so then we looked up, the town, Poplar Bluff was close to a town, Malden, that had an air base. And they trained cadets there. And a lot of those young cadets were LDS. Well, no, not a lot of them, but a handful, And we were the closest branch of the church, Poplar Bluff. So they would come over to Poplar Bluff to go to church. And that was back when Sunday school in Sacrament, morning and evening.
Mm-hmm.
And so either they didn't go to Sacrament meeting, or they had to find some place to go, And so we talked about it with some of the members. And so I think people tried to ask them for dinner so that they didn't have to go
just
back,
stay there.
back and forth.
Yeah.
So we got to know them real well. And usually Pat's mother would have them for dinner, mostly because they were handsome young men, and her daughter was attractive, and she wanted her to get acquainted with her. And so we got to know these guys, and one of them was named Woody Crandall. He was an older guy, not old, but older than these young cadets. And he was in law school. And I don't know why he was in the cadets, whether it was some kind of a military requirement or what it was, but he came from fairly wealthy family, I found out later. I didn't know at the time. And so Betty and I said, why don't we look up Woody Crandall? Because not all the cadets are from Salt Lake,
Mm-hmm.
And we looked him up, And he was really glad to see us, and so he invited us up to his house. He was still with his parents, and it was up in the better neighborhood. I don't know what that area is called, but
The avenues.
no, that's older homes. This was
it's on the tip of my tongue, but
anyway. They had a very nice home, and he had his own like downstairs apartment, and he was back in school, in law school, and so we just were talking to him, and we weren't expecting a handout or anything. We just wanted to go see him and let him know, hey, we did it. We're here in Utah. We don't know what we're going to do, but we're here. And he says, well, you know what? I just did a little investment that paid off for me, and I'm going to write out a check to pay for your tuition for the first quarter.
Oh my goodness.
And
Did you know this?
no.
oh, we were so excited. It meant we could go to school. It was only for a quarter, but so what,
Mhm.
And
But you were living in Salt Lake.
yeah, but that's okay. We had to go to. Now wait till you hear what happens.
Okay.
This is why he did that. Now that I remember it, when we were back in Poplar Bluff, and there were some married couples where the husband was in cadet training, and they came to our branch, and there was this one couple. I think their name was Taylor. They're just really, really neat people. And so we were telling them about our plans, we almost got enough money saved to go out there, and we're so excited and so on. And she and her husband talked about it, and they said, you know what? We own a house there that we rent out to students. And we would like to have you stay there for that first quarter with no charge. Now we got a place to live. So I thought, okay, we got a place to live, but we don't have money for tuition. But then we went to visit Woody, and I think he heard that and thought, well, I can pay the tuition.
Wow.
I don't know what went through their minds, but neither one of them were hard up.
Mm-hmm.
They were
Well, saw a couple of young women that were
Trying to make
really
something.
anxious to
Mhm.
move ahead and do
Yeah.
something really
Yeah.
good with their lives.
Yeah. That's right. I'm sure that's it. Well, this was a little town, very few LDS there, and certainly no young people except us. And so they just were hoping for the best for us. And
Mm-hmm.
our parents weren't members and so on. So Woody paid our tuition. We stayed at I think it was called the Toke House. And interesting enough, years later, it became the main office for Education Week programs.
Oh, really?
Chris Polis worked there.
That is
Isn't that funny how those things
Wasn't
work out?
Chris Polis one of the cadets too?
No.
No, but you knew.
But I'd met him then. He was in the Air Force,
Okay.
and a cadet came to visit our branch, and he was going to school in Malden. And I was talking to him after church one day. I told him a little bit about myself and that I worked at the hospital, and he says, you're a new convert. I have a friend who would be you'd have a lot in common. He's a convert, and he's a medic in the Air Force. And he's down in Texas. And he says, why don't I give you his address and you two just start writing? So I took the address and I started writing.
And how old were you at this time?
Well, I was still in high school, getting close to the senior year, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Junior, senior. And so that's how I met Chris Polis, was through this friend, mutual friend. And so we wrote back and forth quite a bit. He's a dear, dear friend.
Yep. And still is. I mean, to this day.
That's right. Yeah, we love Chris and Gail. I took an English class, English writing class, and religion class, Book of Mormon. And I think it was a history class. It was 9 hours, whatever that amounted to.
Mhm.
And when I came back to school as an our mother, when I went back to school in 80s, they still had my record,
That's crazy.
and it was only going to be effective for one more year
Oh my word.
because it was
Oh,
the
goodness.
quarter system, and they had switched to semester, but they would transfer it from the quarter for so many years.
Mhm.
And this was the last year
One
they were
more
going to do
year
it.
left.
And I'm telling you, those 9 hours came in so handy. Toward the end, I could graduate a lot earlier because it's like a whole quarter or a semester earlier because those.
Which you should say right now, how old were we when you graduated from BYU?
Oh, I've really graduated?
Really graduated.
I was 50.
And it was just like almost exactly your birthday, your 50th birthday.
Mhm, yeah. Well, I set a goal that I was going to try my best to graduate by the time I turned 50. And I, looked at the credits I needed, and I made out my little plan, and I did it. I graduated 14th, I think it was.
And your
2 days
birthday
before I
was on
turned
the
50.
16th. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yep. I very well remember that day.
Yeah.
And they
What year
told
was
us
that?
that we were not supposed to clap.
Oh, yeah.
We supposed to wait till all of the graduates went on stage, but I'm telling you, there's no way we weren't going to clap when you went on that stage.
All clap.
It was exciting.
Yeah, and it was really a family effort, me going to school. Oh, one time, I told you that I went to Springfield and stayed with my brother after I joined the church. Stayed with my brother and his wife.
Bill?
And attended church. They had a really nice branch there in Springfield. And I'll look back on that and think, oh, I bet my brother Bill was just the idea that I was spending the summer with him. But it didn't occur to me that I'd be imposing on them. I slept on the couch and, what's wrong with
They could
this?
have said no, you can't come if they,
Well, Betty Ann would probably have said, well, let her come. Anyway, I look back on, I'm sure that I was a nuisance. But anyway, I met the Nichols family, and they became dear friends. And I went to visit them a lot. And Billy Sue was, their daughter's my age. We became really good friends, and we'd write back and forth. And so they were going to go to Utah. In fact, they were moving to Utah. The mother and father were really old, and they had a huge family, and the kids were all grown except for Billy Sue and her younger sister. So they decided to move to Utah. And one of the daughters had a basement, and they were going to fix it up where their parents could live there. And so they invited me to come. And but they were really poor. I think I said that. We didn't have any food, really. We didn't have any money to buy food, but we had several boxes of soda crackers. So I remember we would sit in the back seat of the car, and we would eat those soda crackers and pretend that they were whatever food we wanted to eat. Oh, this is strawberry shortcake. Man, it is so good. It's just sweet and juicy. Well, I've got a chocolate bar, and we just chomp away on those soda crackers. That's what we ate all the way. Oh, and we stopped in Colorado, where the the water is mineral,
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
and we had Kool-Aid.
Oh, yeah.
So we made a picture of grape Kool-Aid with this mineral water, and it was just like soda
Just
pop.
like soda, yeah.
And that was so good.
Fun.
And of course, we had our soda crackers.
So your soda crackers and your soda pop.
Well, that's right. And when I told that to Grant, because I didn't think it was a big deal. He says, "Oh my
That's
gosh!"
because he's never been.
It is. It's magical.
Yeah.
It just is.
The idea that you just get in the car and you go with this family to Utah and you don't have a penny of money, and you just go and eat soda crackers.
And I think it's cute that you guys made something fun of it.
Oh,
You know, like
we
it's-
did. Yeah,
That's magical.
Yeah, it is.
yeah. I like the Haynes little girl. Well, you just have to pretend. She had a plant that had dust all over. She was in the lobby of the church, or in my church, and I said, "Ooh, those leaves are kind of dusty." And she says, "Yes, to dust them." And I said, "Well, we need a Kleenex or something." And she says, "No, you just have to pretend." And so she's doing like this.
Aw.
She's the cutest little thing. We love this old beautiful home, and you go in the front. I don't want to call it lobby. I'm sure there's a special word for it. The entrance.
Foyer.
And the stairs go up and around.
Mm.
And the landlady had a magazine stand, old antique looking one, and it had all these magazines in it, and they were old. And we were crazy. I mean, this is the 50s. So you know they were really old because they were a novel to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would come home and just sit in the front hall there and look at those magazines, the fashion, the prices, and everything. It was so fun. And she came out one day and she was all excited that we were so interested in the magazines and so on. When we were out looking for apartments, there was some young guys that were kind of flirting with us, you know. They were pruning trees, and so we flirted back and talking conversation, and so they said, "Well, you know where you live," and so on, so on. Anyway, we got together, and the old man that lived in the apartment down the hall, lived alone, came over and knocked on our door and invited us to come into his apartment and have a drink, which we just figured lemonade or something, you know. We were so naive. And so we said, "Well, yeah, we'd come over for a little while." And we knew these guys were going to come by and see us. So we have some friends coming over in a little bit. So we went in there and he fixed us a drink. I don't think it was alcoholic. I have never had alcoholic drink, but you would tell the difference, I think. So so while we're sitting there talking, the guys that were coming to meet us or coming to our apartment to take us somewhere, we weren't in our apartment, but he could hear the talking in this old guy's apartment. And he thought, "What is going on?" And so he knocked on the door, and that old man, he was an old man, but he was the type that thought he was still handsome.
Yeah.
And when our friends thought that we were in his apartment, they said, "Girls,
What do you think you're doing?
Yeah, it's time to go now." And so when we got out of the apartment, he said, "What in the world do you mean going in that man's apartment? He just wanted to offer us a drink. You know, we were so innocent." And I'm sure he had things in mind. But that was the last time we went in his apartment.
Good thing that they said something to you, and they.
It's a good thing they heard our voices.
Yeah.
because he had the door shut.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was two fairly attractive girls. Betty was 5'9.5". She was little,
You two must have been quite.
and I was 4'11".
She was
and a half.
5'9.5" or 4'9.5".
4'9.5".
I'm like, that's not little.
Okay, that's why I said you two must have been a pair. you
Well, I
both
did
really
have
short.
a girlfriend in high school that was 5'9".
Oh.
Yeah, she was even shorter than me. Our apartment was just right up next door, really close to an apartment building. And when you go there, I think it's First Avenue. Anyway, it's still there. The buildings are still there.
Mm-hmm.
And the house kind of, the apartment house, you go up the stairs and then you turn this way and get in our apartment. And it had kind of a bay window kind of thing. It kind of stuck out. And so one night we got the bed out, folding bed, and we noticed that there was a guy that was roaming around in the yard of that apartment building next door to us. It was an actual apartment building. Ours was a home that had divided into apartments. And we noticed that he was just kind of roaming around, and every once in a while he'd jump up to try and see and get high enough to see in the window. And we said, "What's that guy doing?" So we just started watching him. And he came down. He tried to get up on the kind of like patio thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he couldn't get up there. So then pretty soon I thought, well, I guess he gave up. So he had come around here and had gotten on the building somehow where he could get on the ledge and put his feet on the ledge and ease his way down the apartment building to where this girl had just come home. And the problem was that between him and the girl's apartment was another apartment, and they were having a party. And there were a bunch of people there, and the windows were up, and the blinds were up, and everything. And he tried every way he could think of to get past them, because he was doing good on the ledge, but to get in front of that window, somebody's going to see him. And he just kept trying. We didn't have a phone. And we need to call the police, but we don't have a phone. And so we watched it with them. Let's throw a note over there on their patio, a little porch thing. And how are we going to throw a note when we don't have anything heavy enough to take it? So we wrote this note. Someone is trying to break into your someone is trying to get into your apartment. Beware, or whatever.
Sounds like out of a movie.
I know, it does.
And the only thing we've had to throw was a Comet,
Yes.
a can of Comet. It's kind you scrub your bathtub with. Okay, what do we tie it to? So we found a string or something and tied it. And we opened our window and we were going, wham, threw it over there, and it just...
It didn't make it.
I don't know if he just gave up trying to get in, but it was clear that he was trying to get into her apartment. She had just come home and turned the lights on, and you could see her windows and everything. I mean, you could see right into her apartment. And she, took her jacket or whatever off and was walking around, and he was down there looking and looking. The ground went down. It's on the side of the hill, those avenues are. And so the apartment building's up here, and the yard kind of went down.
Mm-hmm.
And he kept trying to jump up. He couldn't get there.